the inaugural FanScout film session. I'm Tyler Oberly, along with Lance Zierlein. Excited to have Theo Ash as well with us on here. Tonight specifically, we're going to be breaking down wide receivers, really get Lance's feedback. If you're not, number one, familiar with the FanScout system, definitely check out FanScout.app and then go ahead and register as a user. When you're in there, you can start grading players. And just as a little bit of a background, I myself was former director of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Myself and Lance have worked together to really help pull the curtain back of what it's like from inside the NFL and to really evaluate players more so from a scouting perspective. The system is built off of, if you go to Lance's draft reviews, and that's what we're going to do today, is look at his top wide receivers in the draft. I'm excited that we've had almost 600 users so far get into the system and start actual rating the players. So we'll see the major disagreements between the community and between Lance. But first, before we even do that, let's dive in on the grading system itself, Lance.
Yeah.
Pull the curtain back on that, have a little bit more feedback, and then Theo, go ahead and ask us questions as we go through too. So go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. The first thing is that Theo he had a tweet where he tagged me, and it was about my grading scale that I use, but it's not really my grading scale. It's a grading scale that Daniel Jeremiah used in the NFL with several teams. Now, we've made some very slight moderations. We've taken some grading numbers out, like a 6.9 is not in there. And Tyler would also know there's certain grading elements that are not in there because, to begin with, NFL grading scales are extremely specific. So they're each silos. So a silo of a 6.0, which is typically a kind of an outlier player. A 6.0 is going to be either for injury issues, for character issues, or there is, like, I think, trait deficiencies. It can be a 6.0 has to be, in the NFL world, it's going to be a specific type of 6.0. A 6.5, for example, is a boom bust player. So even though a 6.5 is higher than a 6.4, which is a very good starter, if I were to stack players, the 6.5 might not necessarily be ahead of a 64. It's just that player has a greater upside in certain ways for me, but they also it's much more of a buyer beware situation too. And I think that's critical. There's, to me, no such thing as a perfect prospect. As you see, potential pro runs 7.3 to 7.5, perennial all pro, I should say. And that would be, I guess at this stage, you could take, I don't know, it would have been Luke Kuechly. It can be.
Yeah, it's going to be one of your consistent top.
You give us one, Theo. Since you do so much in the NFL, who would you say right now is the number one perennial all pro? I guess Pat Mahomes, right?
Yeah, I would say him. I mean, I would probably still put Aaron Donald in that category.
Yeah.
TJ Watt is also getting up there as well, even if you look like this year he was obviously hurt. But the start he was off to before he got hurt, he's probably going to be an all pro just about every year. And then maybe, I don't know. There's not too many in the league right now, I would say.
Yeah, so that perennial all pro.
Justin Jefferson, and
Sure.
he might be another guy that you put up there.
Those guys, Lance, really are like that 7.5 player, that 8.0. Like Tom Brady's an 8.0, right? Like,
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we even had Tom Brady's like a 9.0 in the Bucs system, which is like the highest grade you can give a player, right? But that perennial all pro is normally going to be like like a Zach Martin at the guard, like the best guard consistently year over year at their position. If you're thinking about Quentin Nelson is another one that kind of fits that on the offensive line side.
And that's important that you say that, Tyler, because one of the things on grading scale you have to remember is so the grading scale is not necessarily who you are right now. It's in large part who you are right now, but ultimately my grade is going to be based on who I think you're going to be. So for some people, they are maxed out or they're who they're going to be. For others, you make a projection grade. So your projection grade is going to be based a lot on traits. And so the grade is going to be higher for a player maybe than you see on tape because you're expecting much more from that player. Maybe it has to do with the level of competition, the level of coaching, more nutrition, more growing into a frame, more coaching. You see a very talented, explosive pass rusher who's not a very skilled pass rusher. So you assume that's something that can be taught. They have the physical capabilities. So you make a projection grade, in those cases. But it is important, though, to understand that there are certain silos we're trying to fit them into. So, anywhere from a 6'2" to a 64 is going to be your starters.
Yep.
A 59 is just a very average backup that I would say may not make it to a second contract. They're kind of interchangeable. A 61 is going to be a player who's a good backup who might have a chance to become an eventual starter is the way that I see that. And then the 65 is really more of the, the boom bust type of player. And then once you get into a 67 is to me like a top 10 pick in a good draft. A 67 is going to be in a good draft. This year, I don't think there's as many 67 players.
Yeah, historically, a 67 is going to be, your top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Once you start getting down into like 65 grades or 66 grades, I mean, there literally may be 65 rated players that could be drafted in the third round, depending upon how a team grades a guy. I'll give an example. We had Quan Alexander, who was a fourth round pick for us at LSU, and we had a 65 6.5 grade on him at the time. Now, when we drafted him, he was standing out like a sore thumb on our draft board. He was at that point in time in the fourth round, he's the only 6.5 level player left in the fourth round. So it's very rare for a guy to last that long, right? But when you're starting to get to 65s at the end of the first round, just as a perspective, that's where you start to kind of see teams in a sense reach, right, where they may be they're kind of projecting or they're drafting for that need in a sense. And so that's where that end of the bottom of the first round into the second round, potentially all the way to the third round, frankly, where all of a sudden you see a run on corners or a run on receivers or whatever the case may be, because all of a sudden what teams are seeing during the draft is basically, oh shit, like there's only inside linebacker to me is a great example in this class. It's kind of a weak linebacker class, I think, at the high level. And so if all of a sudden the high level linebackers are being taken and you're in a need of a linebacker, well, they may stretch to draft one of those guys.
I've got a question for you guys. So last year, I remember Jerry Jones after the draft, like flashed their board, and there was only a couple names that had first round grades on it. It was way less than 32. I think it was like 15, 16, 17, something like that. Where is the cutoff for like easy round one grades for you on this scale? And how many of those do you typically give out every year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, I made it where 64 is my cutoff for a first. It's typically I consider a 64 player, a player who has first round potential. Now, I also have projections on my draft profiles. So my projection is where I think the player will go relative to NFL history, what I'm hearing from teams. So my grade, a lot of people don't realize this, but my grade is not necessarily the same as the projection you see on there. The projection is where I believe the player is going to be drafted. So I may have a player being drafted in a second. My grade may be like a 61 on him, which would be more like, a third to potentially even fourth round grade. But I'm trying to give the reader on NFL.com my profiles. I want to give them an idea of how I see the player from a grading standpoint, and then where I believe they are going to be drafted relative to my intel. And I also study, I use drafthistory.com to go take a look at the history of players and where they're drafted. And then, I write so many players. I've written up over like 5,000 players now over the last 8 or 9 years. That what happens is I recognize certain types of wide, like Jordan Addison, for example. I gave him 63. I thought it was easy because for me, I think he's going to be a second round. I believe this the whole time. I think he's going to be a slot receiver. His athletic profile when I watched him was good, wasn't great. He wasn't very productive relative to having a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. And then, he's 175 pounds, I believe, and
Yeah.
more than likely a slot. Those players, if you go look at historically, are not in the first round. So if you go to drafthistory.com, you can get a sense, because Tyler, I'll let you answer this. I truly believe what Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, to your question, Theo, there's certain players that are Dallas Cowboy first rounders, and a lot of that is going to be based upon traits at certain position. And when I say traits, I mean measurables: height, weight, speed, explosiveness. And and Tyler, I think that you study historically where players end up going. I would say there are some things that are changing a bit, especially earlier in the second round, where some smaller, faster guys are going. But a great example is Tavon Austin went in the first round, didn't make it. That ends up hurting that profile down the road, I think.
Yeah. So kind of two tangents of the discussion. We will be diving in the wide receivers, and the size of this wide receiver class is definitely something we're going to dive into because it's something that's extremely unique. And Addison's a great example on that, Lance. Before we get there, to answer your question, Theo, yes. So on the draft board, for most teams, like I said, a 6.7, that 6.9 level player, they're normally drafted by pick 15. You may have, a player that tore his ACL or something like that, or they have some off the field issues to where all of a sudden they're sliding down to pick 20 to 25, maybe at the bottom of the first round. But by and large, those guys are gone within the top 10, top 10 to top 15. One other thing that's pretty interesting that I don't think fans knew, I didn't know before I was in working for a team, is that, with the Bucks, we would put together like a top 125 list. So just as, so fans have the access to get in and rate players. And this is all based off of the grading scale. And you can go ahead and save it. Then you'll have your draft board and you can start to create your own draft board. What we did is we uploaded the top 150 players in the system. And the reason why I haven't put in, and Lance, how many guys have you written?
As of today, I'm up to 418.
Yeah. So Lance has written over 400, scouting reports that he's put together. But one thing that I don't think fans fully understand is, within the draft, what we would do is we would have 500 players rated, but Jason Light, Mike Beal, director of college scouting, John Spytek, the VP of player personnel, the entire group comes together and puts together a top 125 list. And every
How
single
long did that take, Tyler? What was the input like when you guys created that list? And were there arguments or what was that like?
Yeah. So what you do is, as part of the draft board, you have the draft board that you go through and put together, and then inevitably you just dump it, right? From high score all the way down to low score. And that's the exact same thing we're doing now in the community, and which is pretty exciting. We have the entire community in here, over nearly 600 people rating players as we go. So now we're getting a community grade where we can start to dump, where Jalin Carter is right now by the community, the number one player in the system, which is the same as Lance. Like that's the number one player in Lance's system. Maybe a slight difference by the community as an example is Bijan Robinson is basically a 7-0. So what we'll do is we dump that list right now. Here I'm going to the like 7.08, which in reality it's a 7.1. or a 6.69 is a 6.7, right? So we're rounding up that number. And so if you have a stack of from 100 to 125, and they're all a bunch of like 5.9s, what you then do is the team will break down their need. And then they'll start stacking all those 5.9s or 6.0s or 6.5s kind of based on need. So let's say I already have a starting Buccaneers. They have wide receivers. They have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So from a need perspective, the wide receiver, if they're all 6.5s listed across the board, they may have a left tackle that is higher than all the other 6.5s because that's a position of need for them compared to maybe wide receiver as an example. And then you just keep stacking that list. And like I said, is what I think fans don't maybe realize is, you literally in the 7th round, players from your top 125, even though there's 256-ish picks, greater than 250 picks in a draft, you still have on your top 125 list, there's players available on that list that you're normally drafting. Matter of fact, some of those guys go undrafted. So it's not uncommon. Matter of fact, every single year that I was in the draft room, it happened that way. So we are evaluating like 500 guys. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, it's getting funneled all the way down and compacted to a tight list. And that tight list is very specific, to the team, the traits, the medical, the analytics, all of that stuff that gets tied into it.
Yeah, that's all super interesting, and that's something I've heard of, that like on when you watch draft broadcasts, they'll mention that teams really only have a handful of players really that are draftable, that have draftable grades for them, that are on their board, and it's interesting to hear you talk about how you narrow that all down.
So let's dive into the receivers. And Lance, like you brought up, size. And so one thing that really stands out, and let's just be honest too about this receiver class. The highest rated receiver you have in this class is a 6.5. And so just as we're talking about grades and historical perspective, and then we'll talk into the specifics of the players, but a 6.5 player is that boomer bust type prospect, right, Lance? And so to be very frank about this receiver class, there's no true wide receiver one that stands out where you would say, hey, this player, you draft him, and today he's going to be the starting wide receiver for your team. Now, maybe for certain teams, a certain player and we can dive into it, Jaxon Smith-Njigba may be a starter for like the New York Giants or something like that. But if I'm saying across the league, across the entire NFL, is this wide receiver going to be a consistent wide receiver one? And the answer would be no, right?
Yeah, there's not too many guys in this class where I look at them and say, that's going to be a top 10 tier 1 player at their position, like reliably year in and year out. There's good players, I think, like good depth pieces. Addison, going back to him, is a good example. Like if you added him to your receiving core, I think that it would make the group better, but would it raise the ceiling on the group? Would he be someone that like is going to be making Pro Bowls year in and year out that you can build the entire offense around, like Jamar Chase or Jalen Waddle or AJ Brown in Philly? I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba has kind of a unconventional way to get there. He's the only one I would maybe say that about, and I know that I don't know how you guys have things valued, but yeah, you guys are totally, I think, right, and that's the prevailing thought on this class. Is there's
I don't. My whole thing was, I got some pushback for where I had Hyatt, but my grade is a boom bust. I mean, you have to understand that. I just think he has elite game speed. I mean, absolutely elite game speed. And people talk about, well, he ran a 4.41. Watch the tape and see if we will watch the tape. No one is even remotely close to him ever. And one of the reasons is because he gets to top speed very quickly for being a long strider. And when cornerbacks flip their hips, they really lose a lot of ground to him, and then they can't make it. There's not enough makeup speed. And I also think Josh Heupel's offense, and this is something that makes it more boom bust. Josh Heupel's offense at Tennessee puts teams in very difficult situations, and he really does a really good job of mismatching sometimes, especially against Alabama, which we'll see. He mismatches Jalin Hyatt's speed on players. And so will he have that opportunity in pros? I think it's a legitimate question. I think there are legitimate concerns. But my grade, typically when I have a 67, we're looking at guys who I'm looking at the total package, right? I'm looking at, they have the measurables, they have the athletic profile, productivity. They are at wide receiver, for example, they're very competitive, catch oriented. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is maybe the best from a contested catch standpoint that you're going to find. Oh, he is the best. Yeah. He has great ball skills. There's no question. 1 year productivity. Tyler, I know your Elitix model that you created, a lot of it was based on productivity. Tyler had Aaron Donald as the top player in the draft in 2014, which no one else is going to have that. And that was his first year at Tampa, which I'm sure that didn't go over great in the meeting room when your first year as an analytics guy in a room full of non-analytics guys telling them the 280-pound defensive tackle was your top-rated player.
Yeah, that we'll share that entire draft for another story.
Yeah, we'll do that.
It's pretty good. But Yeah. So
Well, here's my. Let me point out. So Zay Flowers has gained about 10 pounds since the draft process, since the off season. He's really worked to get his body type up into the mid 180s. Josh Down is in the low 170s. Very
Hyatt's
unusual,
in the
but he's
170s,
yeah.
like
Jordan Addison is in the
179.
170s.
Addison.
Tank Dell is in the
Yeah. Tank
160s,
Dell
low
small.
160s.
Yeah, so these
So
guys are small. Just in perspective, historical perspectives. I was going through the actual combine data on all of these guys prior to jumping on here, and one thing that stood out to me was how small this receiving class is, just from a historical perspective. And you brought up Tavon Austin, Lance. And that's where traditional scouts, they may really get nervous about drafting one of these receivers high. And so that's where it's really going to come down to traits. And Smith-Njigba, I think, really stands out to where from a floor perspective, his floor is probably higher among maybe other receivers, because at minimum he's a starting slot receiver that could be a true wide receiver 2. I don't know if he'll be all the way up to wide receiver 1, but he could consistently be a wide receiver 2 for most teams.
mhm.
And then to answer your question, though, on my Elitix model and kind of projection just with 1 year productivity, yeah, injury is the biggest question. So like Njigba shut it down this year. Part of that just in full belief he's saving himself for the draft, right?
Yeah.
But they had a he had a full on opportunity to play in the play, and be a part of that Ohio State team down the stretch, and he didn't do it. So I know that there will definitely be questions from teams related to that. So to me, medical is always one of the most critical pieces that play into this that the average fan just doesn't have access to. But games missed due to injury is one of the most important stats to track, and so that for him is one thing that I would really keep an eye on.
Well, and of all the guys you see here, Quentin Johnston has legitimate NFL size, but Smith-Njigba is the one who I'm looking at average starter size. Tyler, this is back in 2017 when I created my board that I have over here. You can just see my little board of information, and one of them is average numbers for all the positions. And at that time, it was 6 foot 6006 204. That's basically how big Smith-Njigba is.
Yep.
So you have he checks the height box.
Yep.
I mean the size box. He checks the short area quickness box, which I think sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't on tape, and I'll show you that. He's not fast. That's not
No,
really
he's
his
not.
game, but he's certainly fast enough. But the hands are really good. I think I'm a little hard on him. I'll be honest with you right now. I watched these guys, and then I went back and I saw him at the combine. I'm like, man, he looked really good.
His shuttle is elite. It really is elite. And then I'm a little biased because I'm a Buckeye fan, but I just remember, last year, not this past year, but the year prior, when he has Chris Olave and Wilson as well.
Garrett Wilson, yeah.
Yeah. Those three, and those two are top, 10, 15 picks in the draft, both really good rookies as well. And both of those two, in an interview with Kirk Herbstreit, said, yeah, Smith-Njigba is better than both of those guys. Are saying he's better than us. That really surprised me when I saw that interview. And there is something about him that like an urgency. You don't feel any urgency from him on film or just when you're watching him. But maybe like you said, Lance, we're being too critical. Maybe it's just maybe flip it the other way. The scout that loves him says, well, it's smooth, right? It's not, he's just a smooth player. So it's all in the eye of the beholder, which is what's beautiful about the draft process. So I'll go ahead and share over to you, Lance, so you can put the
Yeah,
film.
well, no, I think I'll let Theo comment because I know he wanted to say something too.
Yeah, I've gotten higher and higher on JSN as this process has gone on, and I liked him before. Obviously, there is a lack of long speed there. There are times where he's out in the open field and he gets caught from behind. There's a play in the Utah game, I think it was, where he had all those yards, but at one point a guy caught him and he fumbled, I believe. I think that was the Utah game. There was a game against Penn State where he ran a great route and shook a guy and he was out off to the races, and most NFL receivers probably score in that situation, and he gets caught from behind. And sometimes he's just unspectacular. He's a little boring. And then you look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, who I absolutely loved last year, and that guy's the most electric player in the whole league. Like already, he's just super dynamic and fun and does all this stuff. But when I was thinking about JSN, I was thinking a little bit about Travis Kelce, and like the guy is just open all the time, and he's sneaky and he's crafty, and he just gets kind of lost over the middle of the field, and all of a sudden he's there just wide open. And there might be wide tight ends in the league like George Kittle or Darren Waller a couple years ago that have higher end athleticism or bigger splash plays. And Kelce, you're looking at him, or Cooper Kupp when he had his huge season. He's just open all the time. You know, he gets a good repertoire with the quarterback. He's always right on the option routes. He's settling in the right places, and he catches everything, and he has a good sense of where guys are and how to avoid them after the catch. And he just has, and at 19 years old, he had such good production and such a good feel for the game. And he comes from Ohio State, where every single wide receiver that's ever come out of that school has been like fantastic. That like, man, the more I think about it, it's like Keenan Allen, he doesn't have elite speed, or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, or you know. So he's my wide receiver one, and we'll watch the tape on him. But he's someone that like, I liked him, and then I maybe overthought him a little bit, and then like recently, I think I've been getting more and more hype. I was like, maybe I should just keep amping up that grade, because I think that he's going to step in, and he might not be the most talented guy in the league, but man, does he put up numbers, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, the speed ultimately, it's the separation. It's more important than the speed. And then I think the ball skills and the toughness and competitiveness depends on what position. Now, one of the reasons I like Jalin Hyatt a lot, and I'm going to get to it right now, is I like Jalin Hyatt a lot because I know he has an elite trait, a truly elite trait, and that is his game speed. And so we'll get to Jalin Hyatt right here. And so when I gave him the grade, I gave it to him specifically with the understanding that he's not good at running intermediate routes. He doesn't get in and out of breaks great. I never claimed that he is a complete receiver. He's definitely not a complete receiver. But what he is, he's a lot like Will Fuller and Deshaun Jackson. He has an ability to take the top off a defense. If you have him if he is mismatched on coverage, he is going to score a long touchdown. And it's going to be a problem for the defense if they have a lack of speed. So they'll have to go to more zone stuff, or they'll have to put safeties over the top. And I do think he'll be more feast or famine in the pros. He's not a wide receiver one. I think he's a complimentary wide receiver two that stretches the defense, opens it up for players, you know, who operate from the slot, or maybe you've got an X that is a heavily guarded, you know, you're in Minnesota and you've got Justin Jefferson. You want to take some heat off of him. You're going to throw a speed merchant on the other side. I know they have Thielen, which is great, but boy, if you take Hyatt, for example, and you put him there and he got to just go vertical, I mean, your safeties have to worry about Jalin Hyatt. So I think he has an impact on potentially your wide receiver one. He has the ability to hit home runs, and then he has the ability to get easy catches underneath. And I saw this with Will Fuller when he was with the Texans. Teams back off so much out of fear of the speed that stop routes and slants are there all day long. And he has much better hands than Will Fuller to me. Although I got to admit, in the combine, I didn't love his hands in the combine, and I didn't love his body language in the combine. There was something about him on the field, watching him move around, that I didn't love, but I do love him on tape. So let's get to some of this. And the first thing I like to do when I go to the tape, Theo, is the very first thing I like to do is I'm going to go here. And this is the Pro Football Focus, the PFF Ultimate tool, which NFL teams get, and I've got a copy of it, and it's a great tool to tie up with your drop with your stats. So let's look at the first thing I do is I want to go to see his drops. Now I'm going to go career view, and I've got 2 years of data, so I'm going to go look at all 8 of his drops. And let's see.
That is so nice that you can just pull that up.
It really is. It makes it so much more quick.
Just on perspective too, we were talking about Smith-Njigba kind of being a 1 year wonder. I mean, Hyatt falls into that category as well.
He does.
You know, and even Quentin Johnston, kind of on his side, I'll give him a little bit more benefit of the doubt, where he was consistently getting better and better going up. But Hyatt does fall into that 1 year really just out of nowhere statistics this last year too.
So he's operating out of the slot right now. So one of the, even though I know I'm going to look at his drop, I'm always looking at how they. So I want to see right now what kind of forward lean and drive is he giving the route to back cornerbacks off. As you see, the corner's just looking at the quarterback the whole time. This is 2021 Hendon Hooker, and that's a garden variety focus drop.
Yep.
So we'll
Focused
get
on
to
the
the next
defensive
one.
back.
And let me see. This one is in 2022. This is this year. So he's in the slot up top. He's just going to let wide receiver Cedric Tillman run a little traffic. And now he's got to try to make a contested catch. And
I watched this one.
It's a drop, but you see right there. I don't consider
pass
that
interference on that one. That's not a drop.
No,
Yeah.
right.
That was
And
pass interference.
So then we'll go. These two I don't have the Missouri game. So we'll take a look here. And I'm trying to see what I'm looking for now. This is so you can glean a lot out of this, Theo. Watch him get into this break. It's not, he doesn't just sink his hips smoothly. He's a leaner to where, that is not, so I like to take the very first step. I like to see how many steps it takes you when you're driving hard. And he does have a good hard drive phase to back corners off. But as soon as I see him start to break down, I want to see how many steps it takes. And he is one. That is a long stride. But that's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a lot.
Yep.
I like to see 4 to 5. He's 6 to 7 to gather and come back to it. And at that point, it's a drop. But what bothered me there is it takes so long to get into that break. And that's why I already understand he's not a great intermediate pass catcher. But that's a focus drop it's not great. I don't love that either. And this one is just going to be kind of a rounded slant. And I don't know if it's taught for him to run it like that, but when you don't break that angle off sharp, you basically are you're closing the distance for the defensive back to make a play.
To easily get to jumping, especially an NFL defensive back.
This is 2022 once again. And unfortunately, it's a game that Hendon Hooker got hurt in. That one's a little behind him, but he really wasn't that close to making it. But, you got to be able to make those adjustments, and we'll see other guys who can make those adjustments. Let me get to – now I want us to go see contested catches. So he doesn't have a lot because it's just people back off of him. So it's going to be – he's not going to have to see it as much, but I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah, he's someone that really
– Okay, we saw this one. So we'll go to that.
He's someone that can really run away from people. You're not going to see many people who are catching up with him unless it's probably, I'm guessing most of these are going to be under throws that he's got to come back to.
Yeah.
Because, man, he just eats up, even against off coverage. It's insane how quickly he eats up space.
Now, you see, if you look at the upper left-hand corner, it's 3rd and 11 here, and his job is to drive the defense off. And I know what Hendon Hooker's thinking here. He's thinking, okay, I've got him in the seam between the two vertical defenders. I'm just going to throw it in there. But really, as you can see, he drove the coverage off. He did his job.
Yep.
And right there, that comeback is the throw. He probably should have waited and read that cornerback. That cover looks like they're in a little cover 3, cover 4. They got a little bracket coverage. As you can see, they're bracketing basically Hyatt. And so he makes the wrong read on here. But I always go to other stuff on tape just because the tape, every play shows you something. Now, that's a tough contested catch. That's over his head, so I don't really beat him up over that. The Alabama game, which is a huge game. So they put him in motion a lot in this game, which is something you when people ask me, and once again, here he is coming back to the ball. As you again mentioned, Theo, it's a coming back to the ball contested catch.
Yep. I remember this one. I watched this one. That one's tough. You would have had to really go through that guy. I liked Hendon Hooker's pocket movement here, that slide up, but not enough right there,
Yeah.
and then get reset
And then
real quick.
yeah. And look how calm his feet are still. That's the amazing thing. He has the calmest feet in the pocket. It's unreal.
He is a crazy. I don't want to make this about a hooker or anything, but he's like oblivious, and it's both good and bad. He just
Mhm.
does not give. He does not care. He doesn't know it's there. I don't know what it is, but anyway, it's not about him.
So right there, so see, this is something that needs to be tightened up, but this can be worked on with wide receiver coaches. Right here, you see, he just doesn't like he doesn't break it off at sharp enough angle. And so as
No.
he drifts into the coverage. Now that's just now if he's running it at a tighter angle, that coverage doesn't get to it and he's tucking the ball away. Instead, before he can tuck it, it's ripped away. Plus he gets battered by looks like Jordan Battle.
Did that one get ripped too? I thought did he catch that one? I think he caught that one.
Oh
Yeah,
no,
that
that
one
is
was
a
a touchdown.
touchdown.
He
You're
did
right.
catch this one.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's a good catch then. Through contact. That's right, because these are contested. These aren't drops. So this one, he just looks like he's just kind of cruising.
It's kind of a questionable decision by Hooker to maybe
Hooker.
throw that one.
I would agree. You look at a lot of quarterbacks, but I think that all he cares about is I've got one-on-one with
Man-to-man.
Hyatt. I
Yeah,
don't
he's
give a
got.
shit. I'm throwing it. How far a throw is that?
Lance, so you had a comp with Deshaun Jackson for Hyatt, and I remember watching him during the season, and that was the very first thing I thought watching him. I think it might have been the Alabama game. Just and we had Deshaun in Tampa. He does remind me of his overall style and play. And I'll say Deshaun wasn't like you're showing he wasn't your quick stop guy either. He was your
Yeah.
vertical go, right? Get out and
See,
go
so
player.
right
So,
here, though, I mean, he's got to work back to the football, and this is a
yeah.
ball skill thing. This is
Yeah.
instincts, but it's also, I think, it's also teachable. That's important to know. Like you can't teach the speed, but I'd like to see a little bit more dog in him and physicality there, and the contested catch. But ultimately, he came up with it, which is what matters the most in that spot against UT Martin. So not exactly who he's going to be seeing on Sundays. So let's just take a look at, I'll show you the tale of two games. Okay. Let's look at the Tennessee game and we're going to look at, we'll look at all of his targets. Well, first, let's look at him in press. I've heard people worry about press. And I would say to that, I say, you can stack releases. You can also run motion. There's things you can do to,
And they do that a lot with him. They do.
There's a
I do
stack.
worry about him a little bit in press, but it's just so hidden with him all the time with motion and putting him behind the other receivers that he really doesn't have to worry about it much.
So they stacked him there. So he's in the upper slot. And now you see, this is really not where he's not going to be a separator underneath an intermediate. So I recognize he's a level 1 and level 3 wide receiver. So he's got to be elite in level 3. I mean, truly elite for me to carry the grade that I have on him. If not, he's more like a high 63. But I do think he's elite.
And when you're saying level 3, Lance, you're meaning deep down the field is what
I mean 20.
correct.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
20. You can say 20 plus, but I just think it's deep field.
Yep.
I mean, I don't get caught up in 0 to 10 is short, 10 to 20 is intermediate, and an intermediate throw looks like an intermediate throw. But I'm talking about deep.
Right.
Yeah, usually 25 plus. So that's what I mean by a level 3 player. And
I do think that
Deshaun
Jackson has the highest yards per target, I think, in NFL history.
Yeah.
If I have that off the top of my head correctly.
How important
he
is
has the
that
most
to you?
deep ball touchdowns too, like 60 plus yard receiving touchdowns or something like that.
But see, this is a nightmare right here. And Nick Saban and their defense really, I didn't think they didn't do a good job of making changes inside this game. But this is basically, they're going to run interference here. And this is a free release against Brian Branch. And Branch, who just ran in the high 5.5s, has zero chance of stopping this. Safety battle didn't get over on time. And it's a wrap. And remember, these are all just we're just looking at press. Now, I'm going to go look at targets in that Alabama game. And this is the game that obviously is his best game, but I'm not basing everything off the game. I watch all the targets. But you'll also see here he is in motion, and they do that to run a little interference and then to get him matched. We know this is the penalty or the missed catch we saw earlier. Here's the next one up. Once again, he's in the slot here.
If you go back to that last one, he's running pretty close to the sideline there. I was wondering, could he have held his line a little bit farther, like inside the field, to give the quarterback a little bit more room to layer that thing?
That's a really good point. And that's something, and and that's the question I would have with him right off the bat would be, is he a naturally instinctive, competitive, physical, competitive receiver? And when I watched the body language on the combine, he didn't have the same shit to him that Zay Flowers had on the field of the combine, where Zay had so much swagger, it was crazy. And it may seem like a small thing, but you can feel it. You can feel certain players. And I think right here, you're right, Theo. You want to run that a little bit, I think, closer to the, get a little bit tighter because you got to leave that landing area for your quarterback to throw into. Look how small it is for Hendon Hooker to fit this in. If it's not leading him deep, then there's no way to layer it into the bucket there. So that's a good observation. This is just pure gas.
Yeah, goodbye.
So right now, I'm just looking, how's he track it? How does he catch it? Does he understand where his feet are near the sideline? I'm looking at all that kind of stuff. Here's another touchdown. And Josh Heupel basically running him across formation, making it easy.
Mm-hmm.
God, the ref. I watch a lot of NFL film, and then I come to college football, and there's just the ref standing right in the middle of the play. It's like, get him out of there, dude.
Yeah, we don't need that ref.
And I mean, Heupel's had no chance. This guy should not have been covering him on any snaps. No. I mean, he had no chance. But look how seamless and easy. I mean, his gear into second is so easy, and no one ever catches him on tape. But this is also what I like right here is because of his speed, and he's going to have guys backing up and panicking because of what happened earlier. Brian Branch has good footwork. He's really a pretty clean corner with his feet, but he's got him a little panicky here. And even though he doesn't get into his route as cleanly as you want intermediate, we've already established that, he's still got room to make it. And there he worked back to the wide receiver.
Yep.
We saw this play already. That was the 6. This is an incomplete pass. Let's see what happens here.
And so I do agree with you, Lance, when you think of Hyatt and you really look at him, he does have that top end, take the top off ability. Will he ever be a true number one for a team?
No, he's not a number one.
He's more of absolutely no question. Number 2 type receiver.
And here's the other thing. You better put him in the right. So, Theo, you look at a lot of wide receiver routes. You have to have very specific routes for Jalin Hyatt. And this is why a lot of people would not even fool with him. He's not going to be for everyone, but I'm projecting the impact he's going to have on a game because I'm assuming the team who drafts him will have a very specific purpose with how they want to use him, and they'll understand. Even this route, they're going to have to teach him to run a better, to run over routes, to run digs differently, to run any type of crossing routes. Everything he drifts on everything. And it's really, they've really got to work on that. But you're going to see a lot of posts, a lot of corners, a lot of shallow crossers, mesh routes. It's basically going to be, let's get him running at full speed and let's try to throw it to him and let him keep running at full speed. That's what it's going to be. So you're going to have some three catches for 21-yard games, and then you're going to have some 6 for 160 games is what it's going to look like.
He's a little bit like some of those strikers, or maybe like Holland, if you follow soccer. Yeah. Holland has a quote where he's like, one time I want to touch the ball 6 times and score 6 times. They they don't need to touch the ball very much and for them to make an impact on the game.
So
I
I
think
like that you mentioned that, because I think it's very important to be able to pull cross comps from other sports. I just think it's really smart, because sometimes you can recognize things like with Lamar Jackson. One of the things, and for Lamar Jackson, I talked about being a home run hitter, where you're willing to have a higher strikeout total with a home run hitter in baseball, because you know that they have the ability to create runs. So there's a sliding scale between the explosive plays they're able to create, and that's kind of where I am with Jalin Hyatt. Because he creates explosive plays, I'm going to ask a little less of him in terms of being a complete wide receiver. So if you match him up just wide receiver traits on wide receiver traits on Jaxon, Smith-Njigba, it's not going to be close. Contested catches, route running, strength of hands, all that stuff is going to be Smith-Njigba. And I readily recognize that. And, maybe if I stack them, I might stack them differently. But from a grade standpoint, I have to give him the bust potential. But what goes with that is the boom potential. So just to once again clarify why I'm at a 6.5 with him. Now look at what Georgia learns. Georgia says, we're going to sit back here, and Jalin Hyatt's 100% not going to beat us. And look at the shell coverages, Theo, that Kirby gives him. Now, this is easy, and he ends up having a pretty decent game. He's not great he's not a tough runner.
I don't think so. Yeah, he's not super like Quentin Johnston, the taller guy. Quentin Johnston makes guys miss all the time. I think, is this the play? Go back to that last one. That might be one where I was thinking of Johnston when I watched it. Yeah, so many times you see Johnston drive off of his inside foot right here and instantly transition to being a runner. Here he has to kind of turn around, size up the guy instead of feeling what's behind him and making a quick move.
And he's waiting to be tackled. I think he's waiting to be tackled here, as opposed to, I think he's more likely waiting to be tackled, he's expecting to be tackled instead of expecting to break the tackle. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's, I'll readily admit there are areas of concern for me from a competitiveness standpoint with Jalin Hyatt, without question. And here he's going to get over the top. The one time they show them they get him an off-man look with a single high safety, and they got their opportunity.
See ya. Yeah.
And he just misses it. Who's running with them? Oh, that might have been Chris Smith. They played the safety over him a lot. And so I'm looking at tracking right here. I just want to see, how does he adjust to the flight of the ball? There's something, you can learn something from every play. Not bad. It's all right. I don't see tracking as an issue when you watch tape. But look at all these. I mean, they're just not going to show them the same look every time. And everything's going to be catch it underneath, but you're not beating us. Because they knew Hendon Hooker couldn't beat them by just dinking and diming his way down the field. It was just not going to happen.
That was another one that last one was another one where I thought maybe a better receiver could have adjusted to that and come down with a low catch. I feel like there are guys in this class that react to that a little bit sooner and get their hands under that. That might be a little bit harsh, but I feel like I've seen that catch get made by other guys in this class.
Oh yeah. So right here, I want to see, is there any double catch? Is there any concern when he knows he's got to run into the middle of the field? Because there are, like Quentin Johnston has his drops when he's going to the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take a look here, slow motion, and just see, is there any slight bobble? Catches with the hands, catches the point of the football. I like that. Puts it away. Not bad, but as you see, he's getting down. Not really going to go press it that much further. Now, when he stems, he doesn't have a long strike. Sometimes that long step can take away your speed. His second, third step is about the same stride length. He doesn't really alter stride length, which is why he's able to still build up through the stem. But as you can see, you can't really just keep pedaling. You're going to have to declare hips. He's just too fast.
Yep.
And once you do that, as soon as he sees the hips declare, He knows, boom, stick it. But, once again, if he sticks this tighter, a little tighter angle, he's got a little bit better separation after the catch, and that thing might turn into a touchdown. But Hendon Hooker still is a little behind, made him break stride.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, all of his catches there, for the most part, they did a pretty good job of limiting him in that one. But I can spend more time. I'm not going to spend any more time with them, but there are some things I really like about him. Primarily, it's just this. I'll just show you this real quick. These are just all touchdowns. And you can just see. Now this is, I don't even know who BAL is.
That's a wonderful question. I don't think that I know either.
Here's Akron, no big deal. Running
Like
it.
a blown
Boy,
coverage.
Josh Heupel's, it is just a set of screens and pick plays basically, but it's very well conceived. So it's nothing that can be called. He's just running interference basically for Jalin Hyatt. Right here, you got man coverage. He's just going to let him catch it. He's basically saying, just throw it to him and let him outrun everybody. LSU.
Yeah, corner honestly seemed to me like he played that all right, like opened his hips and was running with it. It just doesn't matter.
No, because once he builds a top speed, he carries top speed. I think his top speed is probably 50 yards instead of 40. That's why I don't think that was a real accurate portrayal of how fast he is. The 4.41 he ran at the combine.
4.41's not even that bad either. I guess
no, it's not. Yeah, we're really
when your whole game is built on it, though. You'd like to see people were talking about him like he's going to run a 4.
Yeah, we don't. That's the other thing too about
ridiculous.
this class, for it to be a slight class, a smaller group. There were really no true 4.3 guys out of this group either, which was interesting as well.
Do you think that the combine running is faster now than it was a couple years ago? I've heard like maybe they work on different turf now. It's at a bit of a different time
I will
of
say
day.
the last year's combine numbers were just unbelievably fast. That's where I asked the question, like, did they change out the turf? Is this?
They did.
Because if you look at the historical compared to historical, the current turf does seem faster than what it was there at the Lucas Oil Field.
Yeah, they changed out turf in the 2021 season. So the 2022 turf for the combine was it's new turf. It's faster now. There's no way around it. Historical times at every position. It's just a faster turf.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's going to change over time. I think it's always going to be faster. So let's take a look at Jaxon, Smith-Njigba.
Yeah. One more thing I want to say about Hyatt and just thinking about projecting him in mocks. There's two places that I really like for him. One is the New York Giants. Daniel Jones just doesn't push it down the field at all. It's like comically low. Their deep ball percentage, it's at like 4% of his dropbacks go deep like that. And I think like there's two ways to look at that. It could be a waste to bring in a guy like Jalin Hyatt to a guy who's not very aggressive pushing it down the field. But I think that it's good to bring in guys who don't quite mesh with the skill sets of their quarterbacks. And I think about A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts never really threw it over the middle of the field like before this season. A.J. Brown was the best receiver in the league, catching stuff on inbreakers over the middle of the field. Like he was so effective on those routes. And that just kind of gives them a little bit of incentive to add that to their game, I think. So when you have a guy like Hyatt, maybe that would unlock another part of Daniel Jones where he feels comfortable throwing that deep ball. So I think that's worth a shot. Maybe at 25, if there's no one else that you really like. And then the Chargers is the other one. I think that room desperately needs speed. They've got two guys who
Chargers
are good.
To me just seems like the perfect fit there. If he's sitting in that spot, that does seem like a perfect match in my mind.
Yeah, because they don't create that many explosive plays as big as Justin Herbert's arm is, and I love Justin Herbert more than anybody. But there's just not many explosive plays with him for as talented as he is. And I think a lot of that is because they just don't have anyone who can separate down the field. Keenan Allen at this point, I think is athletically, he can still settle in zones and all that. But athletically, he's pretty bad at this point, in my opinion.
And that's
Still
why,
very smart and crafty, but
yeah.
they're just not. They just don't have anybody
You
to
can't
win
rely on
down the
him to stay
field.
healthy either, just to be honest,
Yeah.
at this point anymore.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think that for Hyatt, you have to have a team that specifically needs deep ball. Like you said, they need to create explosive plays. They need to create the fear of explosive plays. Especially the Giants make so much sense because they have Slayton. You know, they redid Slayton's, or they got him re-signed. But the other thing is, you also want to back safeties off the line for your running back. So if you have a player like Hyatt, all of a sudden the life and times of Saquon Barkley get much, much easier, provided he stays, which I think they'll get a deal done with him. Let's look at, I'm going to share my screen now. And here is Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I'm going to show you so you guys can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is his 2022 numbers. These are the 3 games he played. I don't really care about this so much. And I did see the play where he came up a little limp might have been the Notre Dame game.
Week 1, he got hit on the sideline pretty bad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I could see it. So we're going to use just 2021. Now, for context, when you're doing evaluations, you mentioned about explosive plays, Theo, for Daniel Jones and the Giants. So with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, one of the things I like to do, I do this all the time with quarterbacks. We want to look at heat maps, right? How many, like for example, 24% of Will Levis's passes were behind the line of scrimmage this year. That's pretty important when you want context on, well, he had a 64% completion percentage. Not really. Not when you take out those throws.
Yeah, remove all of those throws. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is he had 114 targets last year. But of those targets, once I go to filter, I've already created a filter of passes of 9 yards and shorter. Once you do that, the targets turn into 68 targets. So 68 of his targets were, 68. Were from 9 yards or shorter. Were very short targets. So a high percentage of his targets were very short throws. A lot of catch and runs. For example, look at the Nebraska game. Just the Nebraska game alone, he had 179 yards receiving, which, feels great. But I want to make sure can you guys see the tape here?
It's still on the PFF screen for me.
Okay, so let me break this. All right, and let me share this. And so one of the things, and I'm not necessarily holding it against them. I just, once again, you just need to have context. And that is, these are all of his throws. We'll make them quick. Boom, stop route. 1. And this is, there's a little mesh route.
That was a really good catch, though, behind his frame like that, spinning around in the air. Every single Ohio State wide receiver can do that. That's like their signature. That was Garrett Wilson's signature thing, too, where he was
unbelievable.
Very easily adjust to a pass thrown behind him. But right here, that's one that not everybody comes down with and transitions to a runner so smoothly.
Yeah, and that was a very smooth play right there. I mean, that's a
very smooth.
And then breaks the tackle.
He fights for extra yards.
And so to differentiate Hyatt, Lance, you were talking more the level 3 player. And Njigba, like he's more of that 1 to 2, right? As far as where the complete opposite, where he's going to make his money in the middle of the field. Theo, to your point,
higher volume catches,
crafty, getting open, finding that open space in the zone, making the catch, converting the first down. So that's where I say, from a floor perspective, to me, he's a starting slot receiver day one for any team in the NFL, with a definite potential to be a true number 2. Can he be a number 1? For some teams, yeah, he would probably be their number 1, but by and large across the league, he's not going to be like a standalone wide receiver 1.
Why did he have 3 drops against Rutgers? It's good to see this. You guys can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's one.
I don't think he saw that one coming. Yeah.
I don't really count that against him.
His eyes off it.
Just a little focus drop.
Mm-hmm. Kind of stumbling out of the break there.
I don't count that a drop. So that's nothing to me. So it's 6 drops. I've already seen 2 of them that I don't really care about. This is what I think is really cool. I can tell you this, Theo. So this is one of the most. This is low key the most important thing for me with most wide receivers is contested catch targets and contested catches. He caught 10. He caught 9 out of 10. I like him to be at least 50%, and not many are. 90% is crazy high. You guys probably couldn't see that screen, but he's 90% contested catches. We're going to take a look at some of them here. But now, if you have a really high contested catch total, that means you're not good at running routes. And when I say, yeah, you're not a good separator. So sometimes I saw a guy the other day who had over 40 contested catch targets in a single season. It was insane.
Was it Rice out of?
No, it wasn't Rasheed Rice. It's a low level guy that I just wrote.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Now on this right here, so I don't see a lot of juice. So I try to think, okay, against an NFL corner, what's going to happen here? Now, number one, you can't put your hands on him right there. But once he gets down the field, good. I love this little beat the leverage move where he gives you that little, almost like a little Euro step in basketball, gets across the leverage. Good awareness in space.
Yep.
Just very instinctive. He's a very instinctive wide receiver. Feet near the sideline, dot. Got 2 down. Now, see, there's something, I feel like his play speed is not, now some of this is just kind of timing of the route, but you do want to make sure that you fight through that redirection.
Mm-hmm.
He's stumbling a little bit there, and guess what? Still caught it.
Jeez, that one was crazy.
Hell of a throw.
42. Yeah.
It really is. So Cole Field, I like how he readjusts his steps in this game. When it's frozen, he's really got a lot of good controlled footing. Like right here, this is actually.
I remember this one.
And that's Dax Hill, who is more of a safety playing nickel. It's kind of a good matchup, I thought, for him, for Smith-Njigba in this game. See, and this is where, I think there's just kind of average juice getting out of some of his breaks there. He just doesn't have great balance. But what's impressive is, to catch, you got to catch it away from your frame. You got to have strong hands, and you got to have a body type that's big enough to withstand a big guy like Dax Hill on top of you. And look at this, away from his frame, strong hands. I think his little double catch there. Yeah, yep. Still focused and came down with it. It's impressive. I think I was a little too hard on him the first time I watched him. I have come up on my grade on him, but I do wonder to this day if I'm not giving enough credence. But I think he's going to be a solid possession receiver, a good starter. I've got a 64. I think he's going to be a good starter. I just don't think he's going to be I don't know if he's going to be a very good starter. Personally,
he reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit.
Yeah, and he's a very good starter right now.
Yeah, it surprised me looking back on this year how many yards he had. He was borderline, I think, top 10 in yards.
Look at this catch. This is the catch of the year last year. And this shows his focus.
Yeah.
I wonder what my grade would be if I saw him play this year and play well this year. and get through the year. I kind of feel like he shut it down this year, and it bothers me a little bit. I hope that's not part of the impact on my grade. I don't think it is, but you always wonder about biases, positive and negative.
Here's the question on him too that I'm thinking about, because when I talk about, hey, he's really a starting slot receiver, not going to be a true number one, but then you watch him contested catches, really crafty, getting open. I mean, Cooper Kupp is that guy, right?
No, that's true.
He very much has a Cooper Kupp type style of game. Now, Cooper Kupp is being utilized to be that number one guy for the Rams. So that's not to say that Smith-Njigba can't be that guy. I think he could potentially be that guy as well. But again, from a floor perspective, I think he has a very high floor. So I will not be surprised to see him go in the first round and be a very productive player at the pro level.
He's going in the first round. Rick Spielman was on a podcast for CBS after a pro day, and he said that he talked to GMs picking in the 20s, and they said they don't think they'll see him in the 20s.
What I should have said, thanks for bringing it up, Theo, is when I say first round, like we're saying like top 15 type.
Okay,
type,
yeah,
right?
like true first round grade. Yeah,
true first round grade receiver. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to look at just his intermediate and deep targets. I'm curious to see how he looks in just specifically these, but the grade PFF gives him is pretty good. So some of these I deleted my first 2 weeks just to give myself more space. So here we go. So even against bad competition, you can learn something. I like how he sets this up with a change of tempo. Makes you faster. It's like a pitcher who has a 92-mile-an-hour fastball, but there's different things he can do to simulate a faster fastball. This is once again against Tulsa. He's in the bottom slot. Now look at how he gets into routes as opposed to Hyatt. Yeah. Look how low his center of gravity is and his knee flexion. Just really good.
2 or 3 steps and he's
just really a smooth player.
Yeah, he's boring, but it's it's all good. I'm bullish on him.
So here's my question. The question that's going to be asked is at the bottom there you have is that Garrett? Who's 5? I can't remember who 5 was last year. So you got Garrett underneath there. You got a guy in the slot who has no chance playing NFL football on Smith-Njigba. I mean, this is an easy throw and catch. That's one that he missed. That's not even. That's right. That was McCord in this game.
I was about to say, I'm very surprised to see Stroud miss that.
Yeah, Sprout doesn't usually miss
those. No.
But I think that, I'm trying to envision when he's against an NFL slot, is he going to be able to get away from them with this route?
Right.
And that's what I have to figure out. And that's the hard thing is, Ohio State quarterbacks are always throwing to wide open guys, but the hard thing is projecting separation. When I've got games, I've got to try to find cornerbacks that give me a good look, and it's not always easy. And then last year I got a snow game against Michigan, which made it a little tougher. But his contested catches were absolutely elite in that game. I mean, great feel for zone here.
Yeah, I think he's a great zone receiver of just settling in, and again that.
Run after catch, something we don't talk enough about receivers in general.
I agree.
Who do you think's the best run after catch receiver in the league right now? I mean, I'm not talking about speed, Theo. I'm talking about pure talent to elude.
I think Tony is the best yak guy in the league when he's healthy. He's never ever healthy. I think he's one of the toughest to bring down, but he's always hurt, and he's almost cutting so severely that it impacts his body negatively. Debo is obviously
Debo's
pretty amazing. Debo's the most productive with it. I think that Jalen Waddle is very good just because his start stop acceleration. He doesn't. I'm always anti putting moves on people. I don't like to see a guy who jukes too much. I would rather just see them run by a guy. I think sometimes they'll slow up and try to flip their hips and set someone up, and then the pursuit gets there. Like I like people who just turn on the jets and go. So maybe Tony could get a little bit better at that. And Waddle is, I think, pretty phenomenal at doing something like that. So Debo, Waddle, Tony, these are names that come to mind for me.
Chase
Chase never goes down on the first tackle, man. That guy's made out of soap.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's
some of these we've seen already.
AJ Brown's pretty good at it too. Cup isn't bad either.
No, Cup is really good.
Cup runs through people, and he's bigger than people expect. Like he's like 6'2". He's not a little slot guy.
He showed some juice there on that seam route.
I agree with you, and I saw it against Maryland too.
Yeah, getting there in that routes. Tampa too, and then to be able to make the catch.
Is this the greatest throw ever? Is this Stroud's masterclass throw?
Oh man, this is a phenomenal throw.
Yeah, this throw, I had to take a cold shower after I saw that. Yeah,
it's really impressive. And here's what I like about Smith-Njigba right here is, so he dials down because he knows.
Yep.
So he knows that he's got to catch and protect. So he gives a little quick peek, and he turns into a catch and protect quickly. Although I don't know if he knew that safety was coming, but he knew the other one was there.
Stays locked in. There's someone jumping up in front of him and kind of distorting his vision a little bit, and he just stays locked on that thing.
I think I'm too hard on Smith-Njigba because this is, you've got to really use him though in the right way. I think he's going to be able to separate. Then I think you need to have him with the right wide receiver. You need him in a slot. You need him with the guy who is, you put him next to a speed guy where all of a sudden he's got a lot of two-way goes from the slot, and he's going to be a problem because he's going to catch everything thrown to him.
Yeah.
There's the fight for the extra yards that you were mentioning.
Yeah. I'd love, I'm a Packers fan. I would love Green Bay to draft him. Even that's pretty high. I think they're picking at like 15 or 16. I think it's 15.
Yeah. You're looking for them to draft wide receiver in the first. Is that what you're telling
me? Rodgers can make anyone good. Maybe Love doesn't quite have that same ability.
Yeah,
so maybe they try to help. Maybe they try to help him out a little bit with someone, because Christian Watson is the speed guy to pair him with, right? Christian Watson's an absolute freak, can take the top off the defense. His game speed is pretty unbelievable. So you have someone like that.
Bears, one of the Bears bevy of picks they have.
I could see the Bears
fields.
I could see him too. Same thing with New York. I kind of like the idea of picking a wide receiver that fits a skill set that your quarterback is kind of lacking. And with Fields, he holds on to the ball too long because he doesn't trust anybody. He doesn't trust the scheme. He doesn't trust the receivers. Darnell Mooney, I think, runs the wrong route all the time. He's someone that I think Bears fans and the league kind of overrates because he was the only guy there for a while and was putting up numbers. But I don't think you can be, if Mooney is your slot guy with Moore and Claypool on the outside, he's someone that I think that you can upgrade from. And I think that JSN is someone that Fields would have a pretty good repertoire with, would give him the confidence to get the ball out faster. And I think that's a big part of what Fields is missing right now, is that trust. And I think
to me, JSN is the same thing as having a pass catching tight end, a high end pass catching tight end, because they're comfort food in the middle of the field. They're safety blanket. Yeah, they're skilled slots. Yeah. Now this is I wanted to run this back so you guys could see. This is an example of how Stroud is much better this year. This is an anticipatory throw, but he just rushed it. There's no reason to throw this early, and he threw it early and behind him. But this year, I think he looks at this differently. This year, he sees the safety can't get involved. I think he'll probably look over that other corner to see he's engaged on the boundary corner. And he would just wait and not rush this. That's a rush throw. He could have thrown to space very, very easily, and he just didn't do that. So I think he's a better quarterback this year because I think he has a better feel for it. And see, that's the one thing you can see a little bit of. He's got a little bit of gear here.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. It's not a sustainable big. I mean, but he's got a little burst. He can hit the X button a little bit, like if this were FIFA. He's not going to have the long speed down the field where you can just keep mashing the X, but he's got enough juice maybe to get a through pass and score a goal. Bang.
He did run well. Like I thought he was going to run slower than what he did, and
Yeah.
I know that could be some home cooking for the pro day. I don't know if that's something that you guys at the NFL level take into account, but it always seems like guys get a little boost for pro days.
I know
But,
it seems like that too, but you are running 40 times. Everyone's got their own watch in their hands. I talked to teams that had him at a 4.53. Tyler, did you guys look at pro day at Tampa Bay? Did you look at pro day times differently than combine times?
Yeah, pro day time is normally historically about 0.4 of a second slower than an automated combine time. And now every team still had a hand combine time as well as the laser. So, we had hand times as well as the laser time at the combine. And then you would also compare your hand time of those scouts at pro day as well. So you could kind of get a feel out of it. I would say he's a 4.55 guy. And I'm not surprised by that either, because on film, that's kind of the way he looks. He looks like a 4.55 guy. So, that may turn some teams off because they want him to be sub 4.5. But I will say his shuttle though, that what he was able to do at the combine was truly elite. I mean, it was like what 3.93 or something like that.
Ridiculous.
And you're talking your slot. If you go do a breakdown on starting slot receivers in the NFL, elite like Julian Edelman, Antonio Brown, like historically really good slot receivers. They're all sub 4.0 shuttle times, and he fits the bill for me from that regard.
I do think he has a bit more outside versatility than like he never played there at Ohio State ever because they had Garrett Wilson and Olave.
Right.
But I don't see a lot of reason why he couldn't line up there occasionally. Like he's not like I'm trying to think of a really slow receiver. I don't know.
No, and he's not slow, right? So when we say 4.55, everyone says, well, that's slow. And you're right. And he's big too, like Lance, you pointed out. I mean, he's 6 foot right there, just under 200 pounds. Like that's the average NFL starting wide receiver.
Yeah. He passes
he's not a small guy either.
He passes the historical Packers height weight thresholds, which is really strict for wide receivers. They don't draft little dudes, and he just barely squeaks in.
Yeah.
So he's someone that I think could have a little bit more outside versatility than he played with at Ohio State, because he never lined up out there. But I mean, he's tall, he's good in contested catch situations, he's a good route runner, and he's got enough speed to be, effective out there where I don't know. So that's something that
you see. So I think one of the things you see a lot is we see a lot of zone coverage, right? You see a lot of, because you got to remember, I'm going to all his targets, but there's a lot of plays where he's not targeted because you've got so many amazing receivers over there. And does he benefit from it? Yeah, I think he did benefit from it without question. He's seeing lesser cornerbacks and lesser DBs sometimes guarding him. You're seeing them primarily face zone, which I think he is 100% going to excel against. I think he is. You look at the way he's able to monitor his tempo when he gets over the top of one of those sinking linebackers, where he doesn't race into the hole. He gives Stroud really good time to make that anticipatory throw over the top of the linebacker when he's hooking back into the middle of the field. That's just really, really good stuff. I mean, he's a great ball tracker, just a phenomenal ball tracker. And look how strong he is there.
Mm-hmm.
That was a touchdown, right? Yeah. Look at this. Defeat leverage, push him inside, and then get over the top of him. And then you see, once again, he's got a good feel to show his numbers. and then be ready because he knows where that safety is.
Yep, instantly.
Just highly instinctive, highly instinctive. This is when you're playing it and you are just free stroking. Like this is when every shot you're taking is going in. You just know you need to get the shot off. That's the mindset that he's in this game. He had over 300 yards received.
Yeah, a crazy game this.
Yeah, this one was.
I mean, this is just a straight bust.
I think this was a all bowl record, not just Rose Bowl, but like.
There's your play, Theo.
That's the one I was thinking about. Yeah, and he did this without not JSN. He is JSN. He did this without Wilson and Olave. Like he was.
Yeah,
he was.
But
the
it was
dude
him and Marvin.
Game.
So
yeah, of course. Yeah, you're right. They've just got two. But for that year, he was the big threat. And even when you took away the other two, even though the two guys behind him are, maybe even better, like Marvin Harrison is like probably going to be a top 5 pick. So, but still, like it was still impressive that he was able to do this. Track.
I mean, is he Cooper Kupp?
He reminds me a lot of Cooper Kupp. I'm not going to lie when I think about him.
Yeah, and Kupp was like a pretty average player for a long time before he got paired with Stafford and put up those kind of crazy numbers. And maybe he never has a season like Kupp broke it, like an offensive player of the year type of season like Kupp did. Maybe he stays at that before zone, but that's still not a bad player to be.
Here's your second gear, Tyler, that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right here. You see it right there when he hits the E?
Yeah. So I have a 66 grade, and I know, like Lance, you were saying that you do a 65 with a 64, and then you jump all the way up to a 67 with the way the grading would be.
So what would your 66 be?
So with the Bucks, we would have a 67 to a 69 was a true wide receiver 1, and then we had a 66 to a 65, and the 65 would be like a starting slot. And then that 66 would be kind of your in between, like he could be the number 2, maybe not your number 1. So just as a reference point, we had Chris Godwin. We had him as a 66 coming out and drafted him in the late 2nd round, early 3rd round.
Yes.
And Smith-Njigba has Chris Godwin type game to me. Godwin had more true down the field speed, but toughness and catch. Just smooth getting in and out of his breaking down, super instinctive, really smart player. He does remind me of Godwin as well. But to me, I'll never say I don't think Godwin's a true wide receiver 1 either. So he really complements Mike well with what Mike does, Mike Evans, who's your true wide receiver 1, right? So that's where I view Njigba. Will we be able to? Can we look at a Quentin Johnston film?
Yeah, quick? Absolutely. Let me.
So
he's really interesting. He is
to me.
So tough.
He's the one guy that I do think has the true wide receiver 1 potential in the class, purely because of body, right? And he does. I'm not going to go to the extent. Well, we'll pull the film up first and watch a little bit.
Let me share. I'll share some of this. I'll share some of the data points right now. So right here, what we're looking at is he saw 102 reps versus press, 103 targets, 61 catches, had 8 drops. Is a little high. 61 catches, 8 drops. So I like to go see prior years, 2 drops, 4 drops. So we're going to go look at those 8 drops right now. And we'll get right to the film. All right.
Can he beat the body catcher allegations here?
The alleged body catcher.
The alleged body catcher allegations.
The eye in the sky never lies. And here we go. These are all drops. Now let me move this out of the way. Are you guys able to see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The top. Okay. There we go. Bad pass, Max Dugan, not on Quentin Johnston. Now, compared to Jalin Hyatt, he's also a long strider,
Yeah.
but he's much cleaner. And you see how he kind of, I mean, there's a little drip, but not much. I mean, it's just, and he knows there's somebody coming. So he's going to, yeah. I'm not going to tell you I blame him.
I mean, I would certainly drop it in that situation. I wouldn't be coming down with that
You
catch.
know who wouldn't? Jaxon, Smith-Njigba
Yeah.
would not have dropped that. But that is an understandable drop. That doesn't really count.
That's
Oh, it was. I guess technically,
statistically, it is.
yeah.
That's why some of these PFF stats, I think they do a really
Yeah,
good
that's why you got to
job.
watch them. Yeah.
You do have to watch the games because like I'm not counting that as a drop, but they have to count it as a drop. Now here we're working back and it's just a focus drop. But there's intensity in his, he knows it's all around him and it's a drop. So now I'm starting to look, okay, is this an issue I have to look for?
That was kind of ugly.
This
It
one
is,
might be a bit of
I
a.
think he should have.
It was probably down in his hip.
Yeah.
No, not a good throw. No, that was right there.
He still
That was
needs to
right
catch
there.
that.
Yeah, he got
Yep.
to catch one.
He kind of let that one into his frame and it bounced off his chest a bit. I think.
So he's a little upright here. You'd like to see, is he on the inside or outside? He's on the inside,
He's
right?
inside.
Yeah. So you'd like to see him with a little more, because a lot of DBs have told me in the past, they read this as they know you're going to break your route off soon. So you want to have a little more forward lean to sell that push so they don't get comfortable trying to sit back down on your route. Let's see the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. So his are better than Jalen's.
He made that guy fall down.
Uh-oh. I don't think you're going to like this, Theo. Watch the catch technique.
He's not beating
I got to move us. Now, instead of hands catching it, tries to open up the body.
Bounces right off. Yep. This is another one. I remember this one. Got to catch this one.
He knows there's a guy closing.
Yeah, when he knows there's guys coming, he definitely feels it.
Yep, and loses focus.
And reacts to it.
Yeah, you can tell. You see it enough. I've seen it 3 times where the focus drops. You're not saying a guy's scared. You're just saying the focus gets away from him. And it's hard. But, I mean, if you're going to be a wide receiver 1, that's one of the things that you're expected to be able to do. Let's take a look at one of his better games. I am going to give it a look against Kansas State, Juju Brents. This is a good.
Is this the first time they played or the second time in the?
This is the first time. This
Okay.
is the first time. Yeah, good question, because he had a big one in the second game, and I got to go to a different film source for that because it's not on this hard drive. So I'm going to use this one. He's at the top. No, he's not. Okay, we already saw this drop. Whereas he's on the bottom at the X. Good tackle.
Really good.
Kansas has an interesting defensive end.
What's his name?
Felix I have to get the full name.
Uzoma.
Yeah.
Uzoma, FAU.
Although I don't know if he was out for this game because I don't see him. So Quentin's going to have space to maneuver.
This is one where he needs to rise up and he doesn't high point this thing. He lets the safety get in and high point this thing. The safety is the more aggressive player in this situation. He's tracking this thing like he's going to keep running, I feel like.
Yeah, this is a passive play because right there he should be elevating.
Yep.
Go get it. And he waits and you see he pulls off of it. He feels his defender and kind of pulls off of it a little bit.
Yeah, it's like he thinks he's going to be able to keep running, like he's running under it. It's like, you can't run into it, dude. There's a safety nailing down.
I think he hears steps. That's the drop behind him.
Mm-hmm.
He's in the slot this time. Now, when he learns, so you can tell he's kind of a step counter here. Watch
Mm-hmm.
the cadence. You see, it's not a true, his rhythm of his steps are more chop, 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 chop. He doesn't look like he's just running smoothly. Looks like he's step counting.
Explain what that. So like when you break, there's a certain amount of steps you take before you
Yeah,
do, and
so
he's just
receivers
like
based
in
on
his
the
own head.
route will have, hey, on this route, we need you to take, on your fifth step with your left. So fifth
This would be seven.
with your leg on your left, all of a sudden, boom, I'm making my my cut. And to Lance's point, you can tell he's almost counting instead of just running.
Well, we'll find another route, but you can see the cadence of his legs. That the strides aren't as natural. They're more upright, right? Chop, 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 chop. And then right there, he kind of you can see him
Straightens
start
out his
short
back.
striding. Yeah. And so these are all tells. In poker, it'd be a tell.
Yep, and it's something that he does all the time is straighten out his back, and like you
Uh-huh.
can always tell when he's about to break. He does it all the time. And I think there
Yeah.
could be a bit more, yeah, and maybe this goes into step counting too. That's never been the way I've verbalized it, but it's a good way to put it. Just not a lot of route salesmanship when it's about to break. Like,
But I like this though. Like I like how he gets away from this press against Juju Brents.
mhm.
And he
He's
showed,
better closer to the line of scrimmage
yeah,
when it comes to creating
and some of the
separation,
other
I think.
stuff can still be taught. It's still like some of it's teachable. This is Juju outside,
Here he torches him.
but he gets a little and look at his strides here. Do you see any like the strides are a more normal? He's got forward
Because
lean.
he knows it's a go, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Hmm.
yep.
Right here, let's see what he does. And that's fine. I mean, it's a shorter route. You just want to make sure. Now he snaps that off with good foot quickness, light
Mm-hmm.
on his feet.
Yeah, I feel like on the shorter routes and like right close to the line of scrimmage, he's better just because he's got less time to think about it, really. Like he's
He's more
just kind of,
natural.
he's more natural, exactly. Like right at the snap of the football, because he's got a pretty good release package. And when notice him running slants, um, like it all looks pretty good. You can see his lateral agility when he's juking or trying to make someone miss or on slants. Like he's got it there, but then the farther you get down the field, he's straightening out. He the longer the rep goes on, it feels like the more he kind of forgets what he's supposed to be doing, really.
Let's watch him at the top here.
And so everything we're talking about when we say that, and I'm not saying he's DK Metcalf, so I'm not saying that. But this is what a lot of the same conversations were of DK when he was coming out, was not instinctive as a more of an athlete playing football, wide receiver, as opposed to like a true wide receiver of, just being smooth, right? So that's one thing. Again, I'm not he DK was, to me, I had a 69 grade on DK when he came out. Like he was just a freak
Yeah, I had a
off the
high grade. I
board.
had the same kind of grade.
And it just shocked the hell out of me and I had AJ actually higher than him. Those were the top two receivers in that draft class. I thought for sure just height, weight, speed, he was going to be drafted in the first round and he wasn't. But
Hmm.
and the reason why he wasn't, just as a reminder to people, is because these were the arguments that scouts had from the inside of like, he's more of an athlete, kind of choppy, not fluid, drops the ball.
Tight hips.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm not saying he's going to be full on DK, but in this draft class among these receivers, this is your true, like from a body type, like this is your wide receiver one.
Yeah. Bro,
X. This
just
is the
raw
guy who can line
traits.
up X. Yeah. And
Yeah, he
DK still
jumped.
have these issues. Like DK still doesn't play as tall as he is, and sometimes he is a little bit sloppy and gives away the route break. And he still is a very, very productive wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see, how much NFL teams value this. And DK should have done what Quentin Johnston did, and that's just duck all the agility drills. Do not run them. If I could add a time machine, I would go tell DK, like, whatever you do, it is okay to drop the agility drills at the combine.
I mean,
Um,
he was freaky though. You don't see that kind of lean mass,
No, yeah, I
height,
mean,
weight, speed, explosiveness.
yeah,
He had every trait you
he
could
was
possibly
freaky,
imagine.
yeah,
And
super.
I didn't care that his 3-cone was bad. I could give a shit less. You're not going to have him running those routes anyway.
No,
It's the same
he was a guy when you looked at it like this is a wide receiver one, first round pick
thing.
in the NFL draft, and when he didn't go, I was actually very surprised in that draft class.
Yeah, I
Was
was too. But so I don't think so. When you see a wide receiver one, people get so caught up in who's your top graded wide receiver. It's really how you stack them, and it's how you would want them on your team. And studying it more. I mean, if I had to, there are more teams I would put Jaxon Smith-Njigba on than Jalin Hyatt. There's more teams I'd probably put Josh Downs from North Carolina on than
North
Jalin
Carolina.
Hyatt. However, if like the Giants, as you mentioned, or the Chargers, if they have a chance to add that guy, it could really, I think, explode your offense. But that's a very niche. Jalin Hyatt is going to be a very niche prospect. So it's kind of tough to verbalize in grades. Like it's not honestly, it's not fair to me because I don't get to go through the process of all this. Because there's a lot of teams who just will have, you got to be a certain type of offensive scheme, first of all, to play him. Smith-Njigba, I think, can play in any kind of scheme. I don't think it really
Yeah.
matters at all. I think Quentin Johnston can play in any scheme. Josh Downs is going to be an interesting one because he was 171, and yet he was maybe as smooth as anybody on the field at the combine. And his tape is really fun to watch.
Mhm.
He's
And
always
but
open.
he's
He's
always
just
open, but
open.
he's
He's always open
171.
all the time. Yeah.
He's
Yep.
171. So to Tyler's point,
Yeah, size.
you know who else is always open? Tank Dell. And he didn't run a fast 40 time. And yet when you watch him
Yeah.
play, unbelievably fast.
So Tank to me, when we were going to talk about sleepers, Tank to me is the undervalued sleeper. I'm extremely concerned about his size. I'm not going to lie, but he has a special teams element that he brings to you as well, and so his production is off the charts from a purely
Yes.
analytical perspective. You would argue he's the best producer out of this entire receiver class. He has a special teams element, so he's a 4 down player potential, which adds value to your team. So he's going to be a make it guy. He's going to make a 53-man roster. And the other thing about him too is just pound for pound, he's not a big dude, but he plays like he has a chip on his shoulder. He's always out to prove, something in his style of play. So he's a guy I really like. I think he's an absolute sleeper.
Here's
I
some
just
of
hate that he's
the
168 pounds or 170 pounds. That's but
Well, he weighed in at 163, and I had a scout tell me that when he went into the school during the year, Tank was playing in the 150s. Now,
yeah,
how much does that scare you?
yeah. And so don't be surprised if he ends up going super, super late. I mean, like you're talking 6th round or somewhere around
You
there.
think so, Tyler? I mean, look at this, as you mentioned. I mean, this is the north-south stuff where it's not a lot of juke. He's got a
So on
good
the analytics side, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Philadelphia Eagles or a Browns team
Mm.
or
Hmm.
a Vikings 49, a very pro analytics staff. Don't be surprised to see him end up going to one of those teams.
The
Because the
Vikings wouldn't
numbers, the
surprise me at
numbers on him,
all.
his production is like the top of the entire draft class.
The Vikings wouldn't surprise me at all. They always seem to draft the guy that's popular with fans, and Tank Dell is a popular sleeper. Like a lot of casual people, like people that I follow, know Tank Dell because of the production and because of the Senior Bowl where he did so good, and a lot of
Yeah,
his
Senior
clips went
Bill really,
viral.
really helped him as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's kind of on everybody's radar and he might slip, like you said. And I feel like the Vikings just every year take a guy that's on every casual fan's radar, slips in the draft, and they take him. Going back to as far as I can remember, TJ Clemmings was a guy that was getting mocked in the first round in a lot of different mocks, like early in the process. He ended up sliding. The Vikings took him. I remember Stephon Diggs was a very popular guy to go pretty high in the
Mhm.
draft, and he ended up falling to like the 4th or 5th round, and the Vikings took him. That's one
Mhm.
where it actually worked. I'm trying to think who else. I don't
Watch,
remember.
watch. I'm going to run his touchdowns this year. Watch his feet near the sideline. Not enough is made about how special he is in terms of his awareness. That's a
Nice,
2-foot
yeah.
drop. His awareness near the sideline twice in this game. Watch this one. Well, I think it's going to be the other one. But as you see, tell me he does. I mean, now that looks a lot faster than Smith-Njigba, for example. Yet their 40 times were not drastically different.
I remember watching on HBO. Saban and Belichick were talking.
Yeah.
They just had this whole conversation that was like an hour long, and they just aired it on HBO. And like at one point, one of them brought up the combine, and then they both just laughed. They were like, "We don't care." It's all for show, which always kind of stuck with me. And it's not, you got to hit certain benchmarks, I think, at the combine. If you have a really bad like athletic performance, I think history shows that those guys don't usually do all that great, but it is important to keep.
Well, let's just state the obvious: 158 pound player in the NFL, it only takes one hit and he could be done. So it's like,
yeah.
Now he never missed a game in college.
He didn't. So I'm telling you, like, from a dude that checks all the boxes except for size, right? So like a pure money ball perspective, when you want to talk about baseball players and the pure money ball, like this is the analytics. This is my model. Like this was the top dude that really stood out. Very undervalued.
Watch him stop running here, by the way.
It'd be interesting to see where he is.
Just so he could get his feet in. He had an understanding. You can't think about that in real time. That's an instinctive, it's just innate where you just have a true understanding of the space you need near the sideline.
You know what? He'd be really fun too to see paired with a team. Not saying the 49ers, but a 49ers type. Maybe it would be the 49ers, where they would line him up in the backfield as well and just do all different types of things. Just to get the player out in space, on a mismatch.
See, when I saw him run a 4.5 unofficial, and then I think it was a high 4.4, it just doesn't match with the tape. The tape is way faster than that. And I'm not saying the Tulane guys here are the fastest, or that was South Florida. But I'm just saying he's consistently open, not just Senior Bowl, but as you see, and everything when he gives you that stick nod, it is a wrap because his first two steps after that are just really electric.
So, do you think NFL teams have GPS track